Hello friends, it's Nick and the team from the Small Green Studio. We are a socially and environmentally responsible production company. Small Green Stories is a diary of our work brought to you as a regular podcast, sometimes recorded on location with clients and partners, and sometimes in the studio with guests. This podcast is for you if you're interested in hearing impactful stories and maybe you want to improve the storytelling at your own organisation. So let's get stuck in.
1 2 1 2
1 2 1 2 1 2. Okay, so I'll have to sync the audio so we can do this. We could probably do a joint effort because we're a bit cramped. So do you want to just lift that up and slam it down for me? Nice. There we go. Official. We're moving. So welcome to Small Green Stories. I'm your host Nick, and today I'm here with Ben Clifford from Erjjio. Is it Erjjio or Erjjio? Erjjio. So, yeah. Do you want to give yourself an introduction, or shall I have a bash based upon your website?
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, happy to do an intro, and thanks so much for inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
It's a bit of an experience. This a bit of an experiment, I should say.
Yeah, it's our own carpool karaoke, isn't it?
A little bit. I think
the
size of the Escalades in the US are a bit more than my small EV. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah. But yeah, I run Erjjio, a digital agency based in Hackney. And yeah, we focus on the environmental impact of the internet and creating low carbon websites. Became a B Corp just like you last year in 2024. And happy to tell you a bit more about that today.
You've done your little intro. First of all, do you like the car? Are you warm enough? We've got the heated seats on.
It is, and I feel like I'm in a spaceship.
Yes.
We've got this huge dashboard of gadgets and displays, haven't we?
Yes, and it's just telling me, do I want to save my battery by turning off the thing? But no, we'll keep the heated seats on, thank you. So where in the world are we right now, and why? Why have we chose this little spot?
We are on Leonard Street in the heart of Shoreditch, and at the top end of here we've got White Collar Factory, which is the co-working space that I'm based in, and at the bottom end of Leonard Street is where I actually started my career when I first moved to London in 2007 in Mark Square, and it's now a WeWork, but it used to be Thomson Financial, it was called at the time, which is where I started in the kind of software industry, but in the kind of fintech space as it would be called now. So it's a nice little coming together of old and new. This street's got a special place in my heart. Yes,
and you and I actually have more in common than we realised as we got speaking, didn't we? And this sort of probably is what they would refer to as a stomping ground, but maybe we'll get onto that a little bit later on. So how is it that you came about, first of all, being a startup yourself, moving into the green space? I sort of loosely coined this as like tech bros, green tech bros, because there's a lot going on in the world right now, which we won't go too far into. But I guess you kind of had a similar journey to me in that you were in a big company doing what you do, and then I use the word became a bit disenchanted. I don't know if that's everybody's choice of word, but you certainly see things, don't you? And then do you have like a moral reaction to it? Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. We have quite a lot in common in terms of our journey. But I was at this huge multinational for 10 years, and it was good fun, and I enjoyed being in tech and doing product management for software. And the work that I do now is quite closely related, but the large kind of corporate culture certainly has its drawbacks, and I was really keen to kind of pursue a different path during my 30s. And so part of that was helping to do something good for the world and sort of get more involved in that ESG kind of space. And the other was just being kind of creative, and that's a big part of what I've always enjoyed in life, being creative. So it's been fun to kind of build my own thing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Coming from, I wasn't a big tech, but I was a big four accounting firm, which is quite ironic given my terrible grasp of numbers, later to discover that there's actually a term for it. I suppose we're both dads as well. Is this something that came about, when you start to have a family, or is it something that you've always felt?
It was, and it's before that. My little boy is 6 now, and I'm kind of 8 years into the journey with Erjjio. But certainly it brings it into focus, doesn't it, when you've got a young human being brought into the world, and that sense of responsibility for their future. So yeah, we've all got to do our best to try and make the world a better place, for sure.
And sort of bring it back then to sort of what you do. What are sort of what are the big problems? Maybe not in the tech space, but specifically in the sort of web hosting. Is it? I mean, from my own point of view, I did actually read a book, Tom Greenwood's book about. I know nothing about programming, nothing about hosting, but I thought if I'm starting something up where I'm trying to walk. I hate that term, but walk the talk. Surely I should be trying to host, because in my world, any kind of creative agency that makes video, you land on their website and it's like full of looping videos, really high res, because that's their shop front of the services that they offer.
Yeah.
Whereas I've gone, actually, no, I'm not about that. I'm not about big looping audio and looping video. But I feel like maybe I've put myself at a disadvantage there, because not everyone immediately is going to go, oh, why are the colours a little bit more muted? Why isn't this like shop front of like whiz bang video? So what are some of the issues that people have with their hosting or with their websites?
Yeah, so there's two main bits to it really, and the first part is the energy that the data center runs on, and then the second part is the amount of data that your site is responsible for loading and transmitting. So generally the quick win is to move your site into a green data center, and what we mean by that is the huge kind of warehouse style data center building obviously uses loads of electricity, loads of water as well, and there are sustainable data centers and there are less sustainable ones, and it's all about kind of being conscious of the data center that you're choosing to host your site in. And the Green Web Foundation is a great way to run a quick check of your website URL and get a yes or no on whether it's already green or not. So the quick win is generally kind of moving it to a data center that runs on renewables as best as we can in the UK, because obviously the grid is involved, and you can't always have renewable generators kind of plugged directly into the building. But the other part is then, once you've done that quick win, how can you optimize your site so that it is responsible for loading and transmitting less data around the internet? And generally the sort of loose relationship is that the more data you have to load, the more energy is involved, and the more carbon emissions get generated by that. So it's all about reducing and optimizing the amount of data that you need to load as well.
Sure. And I guess there must be things about going through that process that also make them better from a responsiveness point of view.
Yeah, there's kind of a win-win basically, that if you're trying to optimize for carbon, you're also kind of accidentally, inadvertently kind of optimizing for speed as well. So it's definitely a win-win. There's no real drawback.
Yeah,
there are these kind of trade-offs to think about, and as you say, with you being focused on video, there are these decisions that you can think about in terms of, well, it would be nice to have a show reel that also plays on the site, and obviously that's glitzy and looks great, but is that actually kind of necessary? Could I pause and only show that to people once they actually ask for it, rather than giving it to them automatically? So it's always a good idea to kind of have these mindful choices at the forefront of the design process, and typically, it's not that we're suggesting that you shouldn't use video at all, but how can you just give people that stuff on demand?
Yeah, for sure. And you played right into my hands there, and I promise right. it wasn't teed up, but that is a decision that I've made. I don't want a looping show reel, because I think I don't know how detailed or accurate my measurements are, but I think most people come onto my site are competitors, or they're people trying to sell me stuff. So I don't, that's a massive draw of as you say, as the carbon. If I've got a looping video and people can scroll down, and then if they want to click through, then they can find videos.
Yeah.
In fact, I've only just recently had a bit of a glow up. We were just a one pager with some very short clips, mostly because we're a new business and we didn't really have the portfolio that we could put online. But also not all of our work is in the public domain. So, you get into those conversations like, well, you can't host our stuff on your site, even though that might be our best work. I guess thinking about my journey, there's a number of ways that someone might come to you for help. They've either pasted their URL, as you say, into one of these measurement tools, and there are a few available, aren't they?
Yeah, websitecarbon.com is the kind of original.
The OG. I used that term, and someone had to ask me what OG was. Right. But then since this big Kellogg's thing about everybody's saying OG, so but it doesn't sound right if you say original gangster, does it? So what was my question? So the way in which people could come to you, they're on a B Corp journey, or they're on a journey, say, oh, we've realised that we are, we're quite carbon heavy or very carbon heavy. You get a rating that's akin to almost like an appliance, isn't it? So it's an A star down to a G, or they just stop counting after it goes into this red territory, the opposite of green, right?
So it goes from A plus down to F, and it was a really helpful change that they made. So the original kind of website carbon.com calculator has been around since, I think it was 2018 that it first came onto the scene, and in 2023, right towards the end, they changed it to have this rating system. And if you read up the kind of how and why they did it, they said that they were inspired by electrical appliances and household goods and stuff, because it's easy to understand. In the past, it was more of a kind of, are you better than average or worse than average? And that's still helpful, but it doesn't really give you a clear, a clear goal to aim for. Whereas now, and our big focus at Erjjio is to get all of our client sites, wherever possible, up to an A or an A plus, and that's what we can achieve in most cases. But being able to kind of have this lettering system and say, I was on a D before, now I'm on an A, kind of gives you also a greater sense of achievement, I think, rather than just I saved 1 gram.
For sure. So going back to like who would come to you for help. So in that scenario, someone's pasted something in, they've said, hey, we've got this rating, you can help them on that. That's probably someone with an existing site, and there are things that you can do. I suppose my entry into this was, I can just get a Wix site or a Squarespace site, but I didn't want it to look like or feel like everybody else's sites that were out there. But equally, I had this in my mind, and I'd read up a little bit about it, and partly through some of the reading that I'd done, these often have so much unused code in the background that actually they're really not that sustainable at all. But I guess time has moved on a little bit now, and we bought our domain from Google, I think, who then sold to Wix or Squarespace. So inadvertently, I might also already be a Squarespace customer, and it gets a little bit convoluted.
Yeah, it was a shame, to be honest, that that Google sold it off to Squarespace, but it's just the domain business. But so the good news is that it's often pretty likely that you can get up to a good rating without having to start from scratch, basically. So it helps if you are starting from scratch and you've got these principles in mind, and ideally you would build these into your design process. And a key principle that Tom's Sustainable Web Design book talks about is the idea of having a page weight budget. So using the new calculator, generally the benchmarks we find in our testing is that if you've got about kind of 0.8 of a megabyte, and you're slightly below that, then you should be able to get an A. And if you're below 0.4 megabytes, then you'll get an A plus. So they're very ambitious kind of budgets to aim for. And typically when someone throws an image onto a website, it tends to be, if you've just taken it straight from your phone, it could be like several megabytes just in one image. But typically what you're kind of aiming for with the image on a site, particularly if it's not like a full width one, is to be less than like 100 kilobytes. Right. And again, if you want to get an A plus, you need to be at 0.4, so you might have a budget for 4 of those images and nothing else. So a lot of the things that we look for when we're optimizing an existing site in terms of the main opportunities that you've got are images and how well have they been optimized already. And generally, so we specialize in WordPress sites, and there's lots of plugins and image optimization tools that you can use. Our favorite one's called Short Pixel. We think it's the best in class, basically, and best all-rounder. So quite often there's some quite big quick wins around just optimizing the images that you've already got on there. The other one tends to be fonts, and fonts are quite a surprising one because they're often very heavy files. Quite often you'll have a font file that's like 300 kilobytes, which again is a large proportion of that budget. So the process of kind of optimizing a font is a bit more technical, and you tend to kind of need some help with that. But the core principle of that is that often these font files are just very bloated because they have lots of different languages in them.
Things that don't need to be there.
Yeah, so there might be, lots of kind of Greek characters or Arabic characters, for example. And if you've got an English speaking audience and you're unlikely to be, serving that content to anyone other than someone interested in reading English content, you kind of don't need those extra characters in there. And typically we find that you can take a font file from 300 kilobytes, for example, down to more like maybe 40.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite common with images and fonts that you can strip out like 80% of the weight without any visual changes on the site. And just lastly, like a similar one that we find on WordPress sites in particular is that there's a kind of an icon library called Font Awesome, and it has about
like Windings or something.
Well, essentially, yeah, they have lots of icons, so it might be like arrows and all sorts of things that you might want to use in little icons on your page. But they also have a huge library of brand of logos, basically.
Assets, yeah.
So they have like over 450 of these brand logos in there, but most of the time people are only using LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, perhaps X, but obviously lots of people are leaving X quite rightly, I think, these days. So that's another big opportunity where you can take a very, very bloated default file, strip it down into only these 3 or 4 social media icon logos that you're actually using, and save a whole load of bloat. So again, you don't have any visual difference in your website, but you're just kind of getting rid of this unnecessary code that gets loaded.
Yeah. If you're starting from scratch and you were me, grabbing a Wix, is it still that bad to be doing it? Are Wix or Squarespace bad, in inverted commas?
Yeah, so there are differences between them. So if you were going to choose between the DIY platforms like that, so far, and this may change, but so far Squarespace doesn't seem to have had any clear environmental policy. And if you run a Squarespace site through the Green Web Foundation checker, it will say that it's not hosted green. It's kind of unclear to me whether they have their own data centers that they own. Obviously Squarespace is quite a big company, or whether they use AWS, the Amazon Web Service, in the background, which is very commonly used for all sorts of kind of SaaS products. But there doesn't seem to be any kind of clear sign of them having a kind of environmental policy or a focus on moving to green energy, which is a shame. Whereas Wix run, rather than using AWS in the background, they use the Google Cloud platform in the background. And Google have traditionally been much better, much stronger on renewable energy, and they're kind of a leader in that field. So, if you're choosing between those two, which are really the main ones, then Wix is better.
Cool. Okay. Well, I'm glad I did neither, but it's one of those. But it's a very real thing. I guess a slightly obnoxious question is: do we still need websites in this day and age?
That's great question. I mean, it's it's probably one I'm quite biased on because
Well, yeah,
it's the business I'm in, but I think marketing is going to be around for a long time. It's obviously existed for a long time, and I think the landscape of marketing and kind of marketing technology and all of that kind of digital stuff that we have is obviously evolving over time. So I think having a shop window online is going to be something that is going to be around for a long time. But I think the more concerning thing is the impact of AI, and the disruption that's bringing to the kind of creative industries, and it's a very strange place to be in the world. AI obviously started out in the kind of text space and that kind of generative AI for writing content, but as you'll know, the production of video is now possible. The production of a website is now possible. So it's a very interesting time. But I still think, the need for kind of authentic human input is still there. And I think actually the kind of pushback and potentially kind of backlash against AI kind of creative assets is already starting to show its head.
I'm glad you brought this up. I don't know if it's because I sent you notes or questions, but the whole AI thing, like, you kind of answered the question. It was like, are we all just doomed to descend into this like pit of AI generated mediocrity? I mean, I saw the social media feed of a company. They're a B Corp. They do great work, and every single one of their images is an AI generated image, and they've clearly gone, give me a shot of busy looking people of different ages and diversity points, and it's truly shocking. But I was just like, how can they be so short-sighted that is affecting the authenticity of what they're doing? And they do great work. I'm not going to name them. But that's on one thing. And I agree with the human input. From my point of view, I mean, having recently done our website as well, we've obviously got the GDPR, we've got our privacy policy, and I think we're going to have to put an AI policy in there as well as good practice, without going into an AI rabbit hole. We hear it so much in everything. It's like, I've got a fridge, right? And there's a freezer and a fridge. And you click a button, it says AI. You push the button, and do you know what it actually does? Measures the temperature of the room and sets the fridge and the freezer accordingly. To me, that's a thermostat. It's got a picture of a head, and it says AI on it. That is not artificial intelligence. Nothing artificial about that. That's semiconductor stuff that's eons old. But my point is that I think we need a policy, and the policy is that we will use it for efficiency. We will use it to shorten a script. We will use it to brainstorm ideas, but we won't use it for creativity in inverted commas. We're not going to say, give me, not going to cut corners on that. It's a massive subject. It's certainly a massive subject. But one thing you can tell us about then, is this poisoning. Tell me about poisoning.
Yeah, so it sounds like you saw a LinkedIn post the other day.
I love the picture of going from a dog to a cat, and then some like weird bad taxidermy thing in the middle. So, and actually, so this is, I mentioned earlier that our preferred image optimization plugin for WordPress is called ShortPixel, and it's a really interesting kind of cool feature that ShortPixel just released last week. And of the various issues with AI, one is the copyright issue, and that's a kind of theft of other people's creative work. So the really cool thing about this kind of, it's called Cloak and Poison, and it's about somehow tricking the AI kind of goblins that that hunt around the internet for for their own kind of machine driven inspiration, so that it doesn't actually appear as it really is. So the one that you saw in the image that I attached was a picture of a dog, which might have been someone's drawing, for example, but kind of gradually morphing into something completely different and became, like you say, a cat or something. I love that. I'm on a creative WhatsApp group, and there's loads of producers, loads of artists, and we sometimes you just get the people just like genuinely worried about what's happening, particularly photographers and licensing and stuff like that. It's certainly an interesting space, and we don't have time to go into it but it's good to know that there is someone or something, even if it's AI fighting AI, and where the mind takes you. Well, and I think the other important thing to say about AI, and just going back to your story about the B Corp that is perhaps kind of heavily using AI to create those images, is that I still think that the issue of the internet and the resources that it is responsible for consuming in the background is not really that widely known, but it's definitely getting much more onto the mainstream kind of radar these days. And so I started Erjjio at the end of 2016, and it was only just becoming a topic, and really at that point it was a green hosting topic, and then the issue of kind of sustainable web design and thinking about kind of data budgets and stuff came in my opinion sort of slightly after the green hosting thing started to get onto the radar. But certainly my journey over these 8 years or so of kind of spreading awareness of this topic, but also being a practitioner in terms of not just spreading awareness, but helping to fix the problem, basically make lighter weight sites, has been certainly an experience of most people saying that's never occurred to me before, and
particularly because we refer to it as the cloud. It's very easy for
I'm
it
glad
to
you
feel
brought this up, because it was
weightless.
one of my first questions, but we launched straight into it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, how misunderstood is it? Just some people will just go, oh, I'm not going to think about that, or my competitors aren't thinking about it, so therefore I'm not going to do it. I'll just be happily ignorant, or genuinely, I had no idea that this was a thing.
Yeah, and I genuinely think people just don't realise that it's a thing. So it just doesn't spring to mind, and when you use the internet, it feels weightless. It doesn't. You can't see the stuff that powers it. So as I say, it's becoming much more of a mainstream news topic now. And just I was flicking through the BBC news just as we were kind of setting up, and there was an article just published today about concerns around the push for economic growth, but also the kind of AI push that that the government wants to focus on. But the concerns around, I mean, this story is about water usage, and this is becoming an increasingly important thing as well. So again, most of the discussions used to be around electricity, because these servers, data centers that have thousands of servers inside, suck up lots of electricity, but they also use lots of water. And particularly in the States and other areas where water's already quite scarce, the amount of water that data centers suck up and use is staggering. And the explosion of new AI data centers that are like even bigger than they've been in the past, and just kind of rapidly getting built out, is a big issue. And it's important that people kind of are aware of this stuff in the background. And when you're creating an image, to go along with your article, I think there are varying kind of estimates, but it's something like, it's 10 times bigger than, if you do a chat GPT query, then it's 10 times bigger in terms of
search,
and then image creation is even it's even heavier than that. So it's just about being mindful, and I think no one would suggest that you just shouldn't use AI at all, but it's about kind of being mindful of, do I actually need to do this thing, or is it just kind of needless?
Yeah. If we can generate a picture of some far-flung place that we didn't have to fly to or send a crew to, that is a good use of AI, because you're not, or generative AI, I should say, because there's probably enough things to base it on. It's not got any people in it, and it's a good carbon saving from that point of view. Yeah. But if you're just needlessly generating stuff, it's a bit bonkers. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your data center then. I know it's near the River Lee. Is that because it's sucking up all the water from it?
So we partner with a data center operator called NetWise, and we're hoping to go over there, weren't we? But it made sense to just stick around Shoreditch in the end. But it's over in Canning Town, and they're quite new on the scene. So I think they've got maybe 2 or 3 data centers, and big focus on sustainability, obviously, and that's why we're pleased to sort of partner with them. As a sort of small digital agency, we don't need to own a whole data center, so that's another thing to just kind of understand, that generally a website individually is only going to be using a very small part of one server, and an agency like us that has quite a few different client sites will typically be using, we use our own dedicated server, so it's a physical bare metal server, it's called, so it's an actual computer.
Sounds rugged.
It's sort of the size of like a printer, or something, sitting in a rack in the data center there. So again, it's all about kind of being aware of who your data center partner is in the background, and where your website's kind of files and activity are actually happening.
That's it's good to know. And certainly when I was looking at setting something up, I did go with one, without mentioning who they are. I did try and go with one. They talked a good game on the green front, but then I couldn't find any credentials about the web carbon rating or where they're hosting. I actually messaged the CEO. He says, we just don't believe that we can do better stuff with our money from a green point of view than paying to be on that search, the database that proves that we are X. I'm like, but it raises a good point about, certainly if we were pursuing B Corp, it's like, it costs money to be a B Corp, no lie. but then like who is going to say that what you've said on your site is true versus anybody else?
Yeah.
And you know, international standards, so ISO certificates, a lot of people don't really understand them, and they just go, oh, maybe it's a regulatory requirement and it's just something. So having something, and you mentioned the
Green Web Foundation.
Green Web Foundation, so that good certifications and also quite transparent.
Yeah, I mean that transparency thing is a big it's a big focus actually that we've been working on over this last kind of year, because what we've seen over the kind of previous years is that it's quite common for there to be these kind of badges that say like, this website is like carbon neutral.
Yeah, there's no end.
Yeah. So obviously the potential for greenwashing there is massive, and generally a lot of it is just greenwashing. And so with the Green Claims Code coming along and making the need for kind of transparency and specificity much more kind of required, we've been working on how we can kind of look at that with what we do and what it means to be a low carbon website. So for us, it's about partly having that Green Web Foundation kind of yes or no that says is it green hosted or not, but even that is quite woolly. The website carbon rating is obviously great because it gives you this much clearer idea of like where are you on a scale, you know, and are you at the kind of high efficiency end or the low efficiency. But what we've done with sites that we build is kind of extend our own badge, which this certified green website kind of badge that we have, but so that rather than just having this badge that doesn't really kind of clearly explain anything, it links off to a personalized kind of data-driven certification page. And so we'll say, and we recertify each site every 3 months, and it will say, here's the website carbon rating, but importantly, show how that's kind of calculated. So we take the data, and there's a free tool called GT Metrics that shows you the kind of breakdown of the images and JavaScript and stuff that gets loaded. So we have like a pie chart that says, you know, here's of this you know, let's say 0.7 megabytes that puts it in A territory, how much of that is image data, how much is font data, and then we explain that, you know, in order to get an A, you need to be below 0.8 and an A plus is below 0.4 and stuff. So I think, it's really important to not just have this kind of certification, but just like with B Corp, you know, you've got this breakdown of like how have you actually achieved that score and what are the different categories. That's how we approach it, and yeah, you know, hopefully that's helpful for people.
Yeah, and on that transparency thing as well. So, correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, but my site included, it's about the carbon load when you refresh a page, right? So that doesn't go into, like, someone's come on, they've tried to get the phone number, or they've had a bit, I've got a horrible analogy, but it's like, I call it the sniff test. You know, it's like when people come on and they do the sniff test without thinking about, you know, dogs sniffing bums or anything like that. It's like, are they who they say they are? Have they got any certifications? Do they look like they're doing what they say they're doing?
Yeah.
But there is a new thing, isn't there, where, you know, for example, that person comes on, they go off. I think hours. The first time that you visit, it's like 0.67 grams. The second time you visit, it's like 0.37. So we get an A-star rating. Great. But if someone then comes on, then they goes through all of our pages, they watch all of our videos, and they regularly come back just because they like watching themselves in a video. Yeah. Their journey, their visit is going to be more carbon intensive, but that is not part of the rating, right? So there are people doing that now, aren't they, who want to say, well, how can we measure the carbon intensity of the actual visitors? Because at the moment, ours is like, well, if 10,000 people visit over a year, you would need X amount of trees to offset, and we can talk about offsetting as well. But you know, that's the carbon intensity of your site. So is it actually a true measurement of what's happening or not? And obviously, we're not in the position where millions or tens of thousands of people are visiting our website. But I remember last year, I think it was at Davos, or was it the COP? They developed a really intensive website. It was getting millions of hits, and you know, it would have needed, you know, a whole bloody rainforest just to cope with what that one website was doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a few things to unpack from that, and One of the first things to mention is that we've talked about websitecarbon.com so far, and that's only typically used to measure the homepage, and you can use it to measure other pages, but partly that's because obviously most of the time people will land on the homepage, and the homepage also tends to have the most content on it, apart from perhaps like a blog landing page if you've got all the different thumbnails on it.
Right.
But so it kind of makes sense to test the homepage. Just again, it's likely to be the longest one with the most kind of content packed into it. But it doesn't give you a view of the other pages on the site. It doesn't give you a view of the amount of traffic that's hitting it. And then importantly, the other bit that you mentioned is about repeat visitors and how that kind of affects it. So there's some other tools coming onto the market that help to kind of expand on that original concepts of websitecarbon.com. And one of them is Digital Carbon Online. And that the really cool thing with that one is that partly it measures all pages, but also it measures the traffic of all of those pages. So rather than just saying my homepage is, an A-rated page, and that's based on the amount of data that it loads and whether it's green hosted, you can now get this much more holistic kind of view of where you might have other heavy pages on the site, and that might be as part of like blog articles, for example, or it might just be other pages that you don't kind of think about. But also how many visits are you getting? So obviously if you've got a kind of a medium heavy page, but you've got like millions of visitors, that's going to be responsible for much more energy use than a very heavy page that one person visits every month. So this kind of holistic kind of aggregation of all pages and all traffic is a really helpful kind of step forward. The other part that you mentioned is around caching and repeat visitors.
Yes. So cookies, what are they? And are they good or bad?
Yeah.
And then I know that ours is designed so you don't there's no cookies on there.
Right.
But then interestingly, I thought, well, how is it less carbon the second time you visit if there's nothing actually going on someone's site?
Yeah. So
local
cookies,
machine, I should say.
Sure. Yeah. So cookies and cache are sort of a couple of kind of closely related concepts. But first of all, on caching, the idea of a cache is that it's like a temporary kind of memory, and there's a cache on the user's device end, and then there's also a cache on the server end. And so if you visit a site and you've essentially pulled the images and the video files potentially and all of the other kind of assets that form a web page from the data center, the physical server computer disk that's sitting somewhere, once your browser's pulled those for the first time, it doesn't need to fetch them again if it's already got them kind of sitting in its cache. So repeat visits are more efficient than when you first visit. And the other part is that when a page first gets kind of sent to a visitor by the server, it has to do some work, particularly with WordPress sites, which are what we call dynamic sites. They have to do some work to kind of build that site from the database and the assets that sit on the server, files and images and things. So it sort of creates that page, does some work, and then serves it to visitors. But the next time someone asks for that page, it won't have to do as much work because it has it stored in this kind of temporary cache.
Right.
So that's quite a helpful way to kind of mitigate, the energy use from visiting a page. And then cookies. I mean, so cookies are quite closely related because obviously when you go to clear your browser, history, it says, do you want to clear cookies and cache? And cookies generally are going to be there for things like, if you've set it up in a sort of GDPR compliant way, you're allowing consent for certain things to run, and typically that might be things like Google Ads and the Google Analytics kind of scripts that need to run to be able to capture this traffic and serve ads to people. And quite often, actually, those containers. Those kind of JavaScript containers are quite heavy as well. So that's also something that we often see and we kind of think about in terms of how to optimize a site. That do you need to have these very heavy kind of JavaScript containers running for things like ads and analytics? And are there any opportunities to potentially remove some that you're not using anymore and you just haven't thought of for a while? sometimes we see people that have got kind of several different Google Analytics kind of tags in there that they don't realize are there, and it's got quite a large amount of this page weight used up, and it just needs a simple tidy up to reduce it a lot. So yeah, it's a bit of a rabbit hole, and some of this stuff you can do by yourself, like with images and making those smaller, but some it helps to just have a helping hand to know what you're looking for and what levers to pull.
Yeah, I mean, we'd spoken because I was just terrified of doing something wrong in my Google workspace because it just seemed like all of our emails were going into spam, and I just like the thought of accidentally getting something wrong with one of these long numbers. Anyway, we're talking about email there, which is something else. Cool. So I've kind of loosely called this Tech Bros, but preceding it with Green Tech Bros. I mean, how are we doing? I mean, I guess from the point of running a small digital agency yourself, you're a startup. Are the robots coming for us? Are we destined to fall into like a climate denier, tech bro, apocalyptic future? What are your reasons to be optimistic in what we're doing with sort of low carbon, but also being sort of creatives in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's no denying that there's a lot to be worried about and concerned about. But I guess, I like to just fall back on that idea of what can we control and what's out of our control. And I think the explosion of AI and all of that kind of growth for growth's sake is kind of out of my control, but I think there's still a huge growing community of people that recognize that we need to take urgent action on these problems that that we're facing as a species, and we're in a very existential crisis. So I guess in terms of what to be optimistic about, it's just that there are people working hard to make the world better, and just have to keep going with what we're able to control and kind of do our best to be part of the solution rather than contributing to the problem.
Absolutely. So we've touched on the fact that we had kind of something else in common as well, and that's that we found out that we both are into being an electronic artist. I hate saying DJ. It's like, oh yeah, we're DJs. When I was growing up, it was like, oh wow, it's I used to do the school discos at school, and this local radio guy helped me become a radio presenter on Britain's smallest hospital radio station. I mean, can you imagine how small that must be? It's literally just the receptionist. But what was interesting about that was the songs that you couldn't play, Stairway to Heaven, Knocking on Heaven's Door, stuff like that. But anyway, I digress. It's one of the reasons why I still feel quite comfortable having a microphone in my hand. But I suppose we cover sort of between us quite a few creative and sort of relatively, well, in your case, very technical, in mine sort of kind of technical, and also being an audio engineer. So if there was a Venn diagram of Ben Clifford, would it be tech bro, green tech bro, music here, bit of what would it look like?
I mean, certainly I'd sort of lean away from the tech bro label. I think it's slightly sort of questionable label these days. But I mean, what I love about the work that I do actually is that there is quite an overlap between kind of design and technology and music, and we do some website stuff with a few different record labels. As well as, I mean, really our kind of core audience that we love to work with is sustainability consultancies and non-profits. But we have some music industry stuff. But I mean, for sure, like, music has always been a huge part of my life, and it's still something that I really enjoy and get a lot of joy from. I feel very lucky that my work kind of overlaps with the things that make me happy. I think that's important.
And you also have your own podcast with a couple of gents.
It's called Small Hours.
Small Hours.
Yeah, Small Hours London.
Yeah, and so you can have a listen to that. I did actually have a little listen. It was one of your New Year's Eve shows, was it?
Yeah, just sort of pre-Christmas, but around that.
And I think the drinks were flowing. But I have brought you a gift.
Okay.
Have you ever watched Alan? Well, we'll see whether it's a good gift or not. Have you seen the Alan Partridge episode where he pulps his books, all of his unsold books?
Yeah.
So I actually have my what you might call a back catalogue. So I've brought you,
Love it.
3 releases on
mate.
of my release. Not the first one, because that actually did sell out, but these were limited edition.
Thanks so much.
There you go. So you did say that I don't know if your decks are set up at the moment or you've gone a bit more digital, but there's certainly no other of those in the world apart from the other 375 people that might have bought those across the world.
Yeah.
So there you go. So there's 3 vinyl records for you. So let's end on something good then. Let's tell me about your team. How many are you? Tell us a bit about the dynamic.
So based it here in Hackney. We're a team of 6, so I have a couple of developers, a couple of designers, and an assistant. They're a lovely team. I've been working with them for several years, and everyone's kind of remote, but it's me based in Hackney here, and it's been quite the journey to sort of gradually build a company and build a team, but we're doing our very best to kind of add something valuable to the world and help to make it a better place.
And as one sort of startup person with a particular focus, how difficult do you find it doing the business side of things? Because it comes down to, it makes no difference how good I am at media production or what problems I can solve for a client.
Yeah.
The finance side of stuff, not being great with numbers, and the sort of peaks and troughs of business. I mean, how have you found it? You said you're at 8 years in. You're a lot further in than I am.
Yeah, well, it's there's no doubt about it. It's a difficult, treacherous journey, and you have to get used to wearing lots of different hats. And you have a bookkeeping hat and your marketing hat and your technician hat and stuff. So yes, it's a challenging journey for sure. It reminds me, so if I can potentially sort of offer up a book recommendation.
Oh, yes.
I do love to read, but there's a book called Endurance, which is about Ernest Shackleton's voyage or sort of journey to Antarctica.
My 10-year-old is learning about Shackleton.
Really?
Yeah, because I had to sit over him doing his homework recently. But yeah.
Well, it's a great story, and I think there's maybe 2 or 3 versions of this book, but it's a sort of biography of his journey. But it's a great analogy for the business journey. They had a huge amount of setbacks and just constant difficulty and challenges and stuff, but I don't know if I'm sort of having a spoiler here, but they make it. They make it home, and that's something that I think you have to have as a business owner. You have to be persistent. You have to be brave. You have to have determination to see it through, and just remember, why you set out on the journey, and it makes it worthwhile and helps you get through those tricky times, which will inevitably come along. It's not easy, but hopefully it's a worthwhile journey.
Yeah, it's reminded me of one question I was going to ask you. So you've said that you like to work with purpose-led companies, with non-profits. Is there a line that you draw? Do you have a selection criteria for who you work with? So from our point of view, we've signed clean creatives. That's like 0 fossil fuel clients. But then it can get a little bit murky, right? You can work with a management consultancy firm and their main client might be the Shells of this world. It's like how is there an internal sort of moral compass that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're just straight turned down stuff that isn't a good fit, basically. I mean, I remember I had one quite bizarre inquiry a few years ago where we've always been very focused on having the kind of low carbon website element of our kind of message front and center, but we got an inquiry from like an oil and gas research analyst that said, can you help me like build a site to talk about my oil and gas research? And I was like, I appreciate you getting in touch, but I'm confused about kind of why you've chosen to get in touch, because politely it's not something that's that's going to be a good fit for us. So I mean, obviously, fossil fuel stuff is just a clear no. But there's quite a lot of stuff that would turn down. I mean, I'd turn down something like a motorsport kind of thing where it doesn't feel like the right fit. But really, we pretty much only work with sustainability consultancies, people that are potentially non-profits and things, but people that have got some kind of kind of social or environmental good at their heart,
core,
and it's pretty much all we do.
Yeah, well, amen to that, and thank you for chatting. For the
Thanks so
benefit of anyone who can or cannot tell, so it did start raining. The windows have steamed up, but it's kind of good because a lot of people walking by, and with two guys sitting in a car with microphones, so they can't really see him. But it's been an experience, and it's not too cold, and hopefully all the cameras have worked. And I'm going to tell the audience in a minute, or people listening, about how I filmed this in a kind of MacGyver setup that you should be able to see on the 360 camera if it's kept recording. But thanks very much, and
thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
And we can now tune into each other's podcasts, and you can see if you can dig your vinyl player out.
Yeah, get
Cheers,
the
Ben. Thank you.
Cheers.
Welcome back. That was a little podcast interview in our electric vehicle that we use for our production so we can get around in a low carbon way, and quite apt that we were talking to Ben from Erjjio on how to design and host for low carbon websites. So yeah, massive thanks to Ben for sparing the time to come and speak to us. We had actually worked inadvertently with the same client where they were doing the development of their website and we were doing the video and photography, but we never actually got to meet until after the fact. So it was great to connect. So here's a little explanation about how we went about recording and filming a podcast in a small electric vehicle. Not everybody would be doing this, but you might be filming or recording in a small room, probably one of those sort of fishbowl with lots of windows and reflective surfaces. The same things will apply, particularly if it's quite cramped. So in front of us, I just had the iPhone on the dashboard, filming a straight shot of the two of us as a wide shot. Just above and between us, we had a 360 camera. 360 cameras are pretty cool because you can do all this funky stuff. The benefits of doing so is that if you're filming and you don't have someone to man a camera, then you can decide which way you want to look. You can reframe it after the fact with software. So here's a little demonstration of all that stuff. And then we also had a professional camera in the corner, which was the close-up shot of Ben. So you'll notice that the phone is probably middle of the road kind of quality. The camera on the close-up of Ben is much better because it's a professional camera. And the 360 camera, whilst it's pretty funky and you can do some different angles, in a dark space like that, even though we had some lights, it isn't very good because it doesn't deal very well with low light because of the size of their sensor. And also all three of those cameras had the sound recording, but they are on camera, on board microphones. And so in a minute I'll demonstrate what that sounds like in one of these cramped spaces and that it's not actually very good. That loud motorbike's going to come straight past us, isn't it, as soon as we okay. That loud motorbike's going to come straight past us, isn't it, as soon as we That loud motorbike's going to come straight past us, isn't it, as soon as we okay. And that's why we chose to have the professional mics, handheld mics, so that they're very directional and just collect the sound from right in front of us and not from everywhere else, which is what you want when you're recording a podcast, particularly with a lot of background noise. But in saying that, because we've taken the trouble to go somewhere specific to do our recording, you don't want to sort of remove yourself from that environment, because imagine if you're in the forest, you might want to hear the wind in the trees, or you might want to hear the birds. And so the whole point of doing field recordings or going somewhere different is so that you get that audio magic as well, so long as it doesn't intrude with the dialogue that you're trying to hear. And in this case, I don't think it did. So that's how you record and film a podcast in an electric vehicle. Please get in touch if you have any feedback or you'd like to collaborate. Ciao for now.